Good afternoon, Westwood. Welcome to the Wolverine Report. Evan Cardimino, Charlotte Lynch, Marie Foscaldo, and Morgan Donahue here. And folks, we have a very special guest, someone who has been a part of Westwood for many years, both on the sports and athletic fields, also in the community, in the high school, someone that knows a thing or two about winning, a Westwood High School Hall of Famer, also a Westwood High School, the only person to coach at Westwood High School and play at Westwood High School and win a state championship in both. But very lucky to have Coach Pindel here. Coach, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm terrific. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So how's the summer been? What have you been up to lately? And how can you catch us up on the last few months?
Things have been busy. The good news is I just got back from a cruise. I went to Bermuda. It was absolutely phenomenal. Well needed, as I found out once I got on the ship. So I just got back from that, but so summer's been great. My summer mostly is morning lifts and organizing, getting ready for the football season. We've had great numbers at our morning lifts. We're really excited about that. We're probably pulling in about 35, 40 kids a day.
Huge.
And, that's more than half the program. So there's huge buy-in right now. And, the kids are excited for the season. And that's where my summer goes. And we're already focused on the next, about 2 weeks from now, we get started. And so the coaches are meeting on a regular basis, making sure all the ducks are in a row before we kick it off.
So glad you said that. So you're still doing the lifts. And,
Yep.
and you're the guy opening up, unlocking and whatnot. But also making sure, the right activities going on.
100%.
Coach Hallian had a famous quote saying, "Boys, the weights aren't going to lift themselves," but it is so important. Your competition's doing that, but to get bigger and stronger, a lot of these games are won at the line of scrimmage, and the team, whether you're on offense, maintaining that line of scrimmage, or on defense, making sure that you're not getting blown off the ball, and it all starts in the weight room. It's awesome to hear that. What are some of the things that go on in the off season outside of the lifts? I know there's some 6-on-6 games that go on as well. What are some of the things the guys have been doing to stay sharp going into 2 weeks when camp starts?
Sure. Obviously the weight room is the number one activity,
Sure.
right? The reality is the games are won in the off season, not on Friday nights.
Absolutely.
If they're not putting the time in the off season, when we get into the season and teams have outworked us, it's going to show. So kids are definitely doing that. But outside of that, so it's the 7-on-7 leagues, and so the kids did 2 winter 7-on-7s. There's an organization that runs some of the leagues out of the bubble down in Weymouth.
Yeah.
So they'd travel down there every Sunday. They'd get a couple of games in. So they did 2 leagues in the winter, and then we did 2 leagues in the spring. We did one at Severian, one in Walpole, and then we just wrapped up last night our last 7-on-7 in league in Weston. So
those have come a long way since
my God, yeah.
Millis 7-on-7s, and it was like once a week, and it was for like maybe a 5-week period of the summer. So what Evan and I have noticed, and this is all sports, is it's not just clubs that kids are playing, but the work that is going on outside of the season and the commitment, and they all come together, and it's some good team bonding too. The captains' practices, but it's really on another level. And you have a great perspective of this because you came into the program 20 plus years ago, and we'll get into some of the different memories and how you came back to Westwood, things like that, but we see that now, and that's certainly something different than I remember from my playing days. What are some of the things that you can recall off the top of your head of what's different about the sport today? Is it the athletics? Is it the preparation? What's different if you had to compare today's game and 20 years ago's game?
Sure. I'd say in my opinion, the big difference was like 20 years ago we lifted, but it gave us an advantage.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't lift, you fall behind.
Yeah,
like
good
every
point.
program now does it. You're not really gaining an advantage in the weight room. You're just trying to maintain with other teams.
Yeah.
You have to find other ways, like whether it's 7-on-7s, whether it's captain's practices, to get the edge to push your program a little bit ahead. But going back to like when you played, we'd have 8-10 kids in a weight room. It wasn't 40 like it is now, and it to me that's the big that's one of the biggest differences is the weight room isn't an advantage. It's just part of the game now.
It is. Yeah, when I played in college, we were lifting during the season. We weren't going for records or anything. It was just maintaining. We just wanted to maintain strength, and it was more. I wouldn't call it cosmetic. It was just more part of the game. It was almost like stretching, but it was what we would do before practice, then practice, in the season games and whatnot. But I mean, it's awesome to hear that it is more intertwined now. What I've noticed too is it's very competitive in the weight room. Guys are cheering each other on. It is pretty inspiring when you see a freshman, sophomore that came in and they're starting to grow. And then when you see them hit the weights and they're starting to hit the weights of juniors and seniors and you're cheering them on, that gets everyone fired up. And, you haven't even snapped a ball yet. So going into that season, they're ready to put the shoulder pads on.
100%. And I think it does a lot. I mean, watching, and I'd say our culture has really grown, and that's a big part of where we are today as a program. But, being in the weight room when you have 40 kids and a kid's trying to max out on a bench press or whatever, and you have 30 kids around him screaming and cheering them on, it is a tremendous team building thing. And one of the things I always try and implore, especially to the younger kids, because you brought that up, it's like, I don't care what your max is. Yeah. I just care that you're there trying to make yourself better, right? Like, as long as you're making yourself better, you're not going to compare to that senior who has, 50 pounds on you and a tremendous amount of testosterone because they're 18 and you're 14, So it's not about the numbers. It's just about the effort and the consistency and being a good teammate.
We had Coach Todd Zahurik on here a couple weeks ago. One of the things he mentioned when talking about looking at freshmen versus seniors is when he's doing it, if a freshman's coming in and putting in that effort, he might be more likely to play him over a senior. What's sort of your take on that when you see a freshman come into the weight room and pull numbers like that, or on practice and 7-on-7s is given that effort? Do you think you're more likely to go to a senior still, or do you think if that freshman's going to earn the playing time, you're going to give it to him?
Obviously, anyone's going to have to earn playing time. That goes without saying. But the hard part of, again, and my sport's obviously distinctly different from lacrosse, where I could have a freshman in there and they're consistent in their work and really hard. But if I don't feel it's safe for them to be on a field on a Friday night, they could, just size. It's just an 18-year-old is so much physically more powerful than a 14-year-old. And I really hesitate to put anyone in that situation unless I'm very confident they can handle it. So I usually, especially with freshmen, I'll default to the older kids. But with sophomores and juniors, to me, once you can become a sophomore or junior, it's all good to go. It's whoever earns it. And if you're a sophomore and you hit after your freshman year, you hit the weight room hard and you outwork the senior, you might get the nod over that senior.
Yeah, it was rare for a freshman to get out there. Like Ryan Gold is probably one of the only ones and he was he was ready to play probably by 8th grade.
Yeah, exactly.
He was in
he was lifting with us in 8th grade.
Yeah. And he earned it. And I can't think of, I'm sure there's some that might have come throughout the years, but if you play as a sophomore, that's like playing as, a freshman in other sports. Like sophomore, you're still undersized unless you're some genetic freak built in a lab, but you're undersized and playing and contributing, outside of special teams. If you're a starter as a sophomore, that's a really big deal. And, is that still the case today? Is because you make a good point. It is size, the hits, come from an 18-year-old, and when you're a 14-year-old, a little different than when it's, kids your own age on the middle school teams.
No, absolutely. And it is sort of the same now. You have to be exceptional as a sophomore to play at a varsity level. Yeah. And to be able to get on the field and sustain that type of contact, again, a lot of it's positional, right? Like a quarterback, I'm more apt to play because the contact is less, right? A cornerback, probably. O-lineman, you better have size, right? Linebacker, running back, you better be able to handle the contact of the game. It's a violent game. And I'm never going to put a kid in a position to get hurt or fail. So they need to prove to me that they're the best option I have and that they can handle it. So yeah, I'd say, it is still the same where sophomore starters are definitely more, at least in our program, are more unique because we have good enough numbers.
Yeah. So Coach, you played at Westwood, mentioned 1988 state championship win at Nickerson Field in BU.
Yes, sir.
You're a Hall of Famer. You are Westwood through and through. How special is it to come back and coach for the program that was so special to you?
I'll honestly say it's my dream job. Yeah. From when I started coaching, when I graduated college, I came back to Westwood, talked to Coach Wilfinger, who was the coach back then. He's like, I don't have any coaching positions, but if you want to volunteer, and I volunteered for 3 years, and from there I knew this is where I want to stay. Yeah. And of my 30-year coaching career, I've spent 20 in Westwood, and to be back and to be a head coach, like I said, it's what I've always wanted. It's awesome to try and give these kids the same experience that I had, that you had, of what football can teach you, and especially in a town like this with the tradition that we have, it's magical.
Prior to being the head coach, you were the offensive coordinator for some time. So are you still kind of overseeing some of those things with the offense that you would have as a coordinator, or are you more hands-off and letting your coordinators currently work on that?
I am the offensive coordinator.
So you have consultants, I'm sure.
100%. I mean, I have a great staff, and we all contribute, and we game plan together. But on a Friday night, I'm the one calling the plays. I mean, I don't even know what the number is, but I've called a couple of hundred games. Yeah. So to put that on someone else, unless I feel they're really ready, I don't want to set the kids up for failure. So I want to make sure they're having the best that they can have. And right now I can do both. Because again, my defensive coordinators have been great. My coaches support everything, and they're always talking to me about special teams and situations that are coming. Like, hey, coach, we're up by 3. This is what's going on, to make sure that my mindset is right. So the communication's there, but I'm still calling the plays. I don't know if I'll ever give that up.
And I'd imagine you allow your positional coaches to help out with, what's the block techniques, stuff like that, which are huge. And Coach, we were talking earlier. In my opinion, you really changed the game at the high school level. You went with a spread offense because, I think you do a good job of understanding what do you have talent-wise. Where can you use people's strengths? We had some terrific receivers that came through. Joe Fabiano, Chris Lamb, shout out Joe Fabiano, Chris Lamb, and a terrific quarterback, Jeff White, shout out Jeff White. Also a great running back. You knew how to use all of those parts, and Amadeus Guerrero-Poe.
Yep.
Was that something that you brought into the program because you saw, what you could use with all this talent at once and how difficult it would make a defense to defend? Or was it something that, you wanted to just kind of bring in, see how it goes? If it doesn't work, you can always go back to, the wing T, What was your mindset into that? And are you still also using that as kind of your base offense today?
I am still using a lot of that. A lot of the stuff you ran a lot of the terminology is still the same. So what was going on back then when I came in, Coach Von Yu was the head coach, and he was a big I guy. He wanted to run the I formation, pound the rock, pound the rock, pound the rock, which, he's the boss. He makes the calls. Yeah. He left after the 03 year, and Coach Hallian came over and was pretty much like, hey, you run the offense. Yeah. So that gave me more of the discretion to kind of open things up and kind of get more into the spread offense. Mm-hmm. And when you got a quarterback like Jeff White, Hall of Famer, receivers like Fabiano and Laham, Hall of Famers, I mean, it really, Mark Leone,
Ryan Harney.
Again, we were loaded with offensive weapons. And my thought process is, how do I get as many weapons on the field as I can to stress the defense?
Yeah.
And when you can do that, what it does is now I can sit back as a coordinator, watch and go, this is what they're worried about. So if they're worried about that, I'll attack them where they are, right? And, it's a basic philosophy, and it was actually what I used this year. I felt offensively, our team this year was as good offensively as actually the 04 team was the closest. We missed beating that record by 7 points. Okay. And we took 2 knees at the 1 this year. So that's close.
Asterisks in a positive way.
In a positive way. So, it was sort of the same philosophy this year. If you're going to take the pass away, we'll run the ball. If you're going to take the run away, we can throw. And, that's sort of been my philosophy since you played.
Well, I love how you do pass a lot, but you do have some of the best running backs in the league. But I do want to, we'll talk about that. I do want to talk about, you do a good job of packages too. You got to have some good packages, especially when you're playing certain opponents. You see some, areas of opportunity where we can, exploit certain defenses. If there's, a team that runs man defense and you got a Crowley on the outside and you got a Warren, I'm throwing that ball up. I like that matchup, one-on-one, fades. you did a very good job. You did a very good job of putting together packages and kind of getting some of those secondary players in for a number of different reasons, I'm sure. One being they can add value. It's another look. But there's also the component of a lot of times they're younger guys, sophomores, and it really helps boost their confidence when they're getting these big plays. And then the next year they come in and they probably, either competing for a starting role or are the starting role. Is that something is that something that comes to mind when you're putting these packages together about getting them in the game, getting them some reps, and also kind of getting them ready for, their future and having that confidence going into the following season?
It definitely does. One of the things we do, we do as a team is, I'm going to look at who my weapons are, and that changes from week 1 to week 6 to week 10, right? There's a sophomore who's not ready week 1, but by 6, he's, tearing up the JV team, and it's like, I got to get this kid some varsity time. Yeah. He's earned it, right? And I think he's ready now, so you have to create a package, and you don't want to overload him because it's a big transition as a sophomore to get onto a varsity field. Mm-hmm. So you want to keep it small, keep it simple, but you want to get them the experience. You want them to be rewarded for the work they put in. For sure. And that's part of it. And the other part of when you look at personnel groupings is, if you have some studs out there, teams are going to take them away. So if I can get a mismatch out there of a sophomore who's a burner or a sophomore who's a big possession receiver, and they have a short outside linebacker, I'm going to take advantage of that in using the personnel I have. And that's so that's how the packages come along. And we might use one package one week and then not use it for 2 or 3. It's going to depend on matchups. Sure. But, we'll rep it every week so that sophomore or junior, whoever, knows that they're still involved in the game plan, that I'm still thinking about them. It just might not be a good matchup for that week.
For sure. 1988, special season, you won a Super Bowl. Your quarterback was Greg Warren, Hall of Famer. Broke the touchdown record.
He did.
For quarterback touchdowns.
32.
His son is on your team, senior wide receiver. How special of a player was Greg, and how cool is it to coach his son?
Greg was, as a quarterback, it's for people that don't know, he's for a lineman, he was a dream. Like, he never took sacks. We threw the ball, I can't remember the number. It was like 332. It was like 232. But back then, 23 passes in a game in 1988 is unheard of. It was 10 passes. It was all run the ball. So we sort of broke the norm, and we threw the ball all over the place. And we only gave up 10 sacks, and teams just couldn't cover us. So it was like send 7. And anytime he didn't have someone open, he'd just throw the ball away. He never tried to, which gave us confidence up front. So he was great in that way. I mean, I've never, in 30 years of coaching, I don't know if I've coached a kid that was as talented as he was. Wow. He went to BC, was a walk-on. Yeah. Was number 4 on the depth chart as a freshman, which to me is impressive. And very impressive. And then just decided he wanted to go in a different direction. But I mean, he was just an unbelievable talent, great kid. Yeah. Never yelled at you, was always supportive. He's just a great leader, very quiet, but a great leader. Always had your back. So he was great to play with. And to coach his son, it's just kind of ironic because when I became the coordinator, I called up Greg and I went and sat down with him like, hey, when you played, what were some of your favorite plays? Because again, I like to throw the ball. Yeah, so passes. So he's going over some of the stuff and some of the schemes that they did. Because when I played, I was the lineman. I didn't pay attention to the pass game. So he definitely gave me some ideas that I still use to this day. But and then fast forward, and now his son's a senior. One of the wide receivers for us, one of the best athletes in the league. Really have a lot of high expectations for him. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool to be able to coach one of my friends' kids. It's kind of unique.
Yeah, and on top of coaching Greg Warren's sons, you also have the opportunity to coach your sons.
I do.
So what's that been like for you? What does that mean to you?
It's really awesome. Yeah. So one of the reasons, I left Westwood for a while, went to another town, and one of the main reasons I left that other town when this job opened up was, obviously it was always my dream job, but with having my kids coming up and through the program, it was something that was special to me. And, so I'm able to do that. And, my oldest, Cole, just graduated, and he was awesome to coach. Great kid. I mean, I'm bragging.
Yeah.
But he's a great kid. He was a captain.
He
He worked hard, very coachable. So, to have the year we had this year was really special. Ty's the same way. He's a great kid, great leader. A lot of opportunities in front of him coming up for the next couple of years. And I still have a 7th grader, and I'm looking forward to coaching him. He's a ham.
And Cole had that great tackle in the backfield for loss in the Thanksgiving game. Memorable play, and a heck of a season for those guys. TVL Champs coach. It's been a little bit for Westwood because it's nothing that Westwood's doing. Westwood's been doing awesome. They've had terrific seasons, playoff seasons. But there's really tough competitions. It's gotten even tougher over the years when you add Norwood, to the mix too. And then Holliston just seems to turn into this kind of this college factory. They're sending kids to Division I level. Playing at UConn and BC. How rewarding was that TVL win on Westwood's home field? That opportunity doesn't happen often to be able to win the TVL on your home field with your son as a captain his senior year. That's got to be a top memory of yours.
It's funny you're saying it, and I'm getting goosebumps as I speak about it. It was a special game. I'll talk to some of the seniors that have graduated. I'll text with them, and they still bring it up.
Yeah.
My defensive coordinator, who unfortunately left and moved out of state, he still texts me about how special that game was. It was a lot going into that game. The year before, we had the same opportunity in Holliston. If we would have won, we would have been TVL champs, and we let that opportunity get away. And for these kids to be able to rally and dig deep and pull that win off. And, there were times in that game we were losing, and, we had opportunities of that game to swing either way. And a lot of kids in a lot of different situations, Joe Vinci, Greg Papa, Jack Crowley at the end of the game. Dante Martucci took it over on the run game. I mean, it was a whole team effort. Andy Weeman had a great catch in the 4th quarter. Like, I could keep listing names and how special it was, but it literally was a team effort. And they all stepped up at different points in that game and turned it into what it was.
Character win.
Have 100% program win. Those kids, it just went to me, it went to all the work they put in the offseason, what we started with the weight room, all that stuff paid off in the 4th quarter of the Holliston game where we just dominated the game.
Yeah. Question for you.
Sure.
What is the riskiest play call you've made that worked out? I got my opinion on one.
Riskiest play call.
You've been known to take some risks.
I have taken some risks. Well, that's why I'm saying riskiest. I'm trying to think that one through.
Maybe I'll start off with mine.
Go ahead.
And we'll see what yours is. 2004 Super Bowl. We intercepted the ball. We brought it all the way down to the 5. And we were down, I think that we were down 1 touchdown, maybe 2. And they were going the other way. And we were like, they're about to go up right before halftime. So it was a pivotal moment in the game. Obviously want to take full advantage of scoring there. I think we got stuffed on the first 2 plays. 3rd down, you called, I don't know if it was a screen pass to Amadeus or if it was like him coming out of the backfield. And
it was a screen.
It was a screen. Gets it in for the touchdown, like very, very ballsy call. I don't know what's a better word, or very risky call.
Yep.
That paid off. And it was the right call because they were really playing, they kind of were playing goal line on that 5-yard line, and they had some pretty solid cornerbacks that were playing man up. I think we went into kind of some of those goal line packages too. So we might have had a receiver off the field. That play call was huge. Changed the game. Scored that touchdown. The game is a different game. We go into halftime, I believe, down 7 instead of down 14. And we had momentum, and they had to think about that all halftime.
If you actually, I don't know if you remember the play before we ran, I believe it was a boot, and Mark Leone was open in the end zone, caught the ball for a touchdown, but they called
there was a penalty.
Hold.
That's right.
I think it was on Joe Masham. I don't know if it was a hold, but they called it on him. And they called it on him, and it got called back. So we went from scoring and went back. And no, my again, like thought process is, you know, in that situation, team's going to be bringing the heat. You got to roll the dice.
They were blitzing. You were definitely. It was such a big call, pivotal call, and it was the right call. So that was my opinion on one. I don't know if there was any similar kind of throughout the years.
I don't know. It's you go. So it's hard as a coordinator because I don't think they're risky, or I wouldn't be calling it, right? Like I look at it just differently. I do. You know, I think there was one where I don't know. I can't remember. It might have been Bellingham.
Yeah.
We were struggling. It was at Severian, and we're struggling, and we had the ball at our own 1 yard line coming out. I think we caused a fumble, and you know, I come out and I run fades to Fabiano down the sideline, throwing right it out of the end zone. And I'm like, you know what? You got to get the ball out to your athletes. And, you know, again, like I said, the hard part for me is like, I trust my kids on the field, right? I have to trust my line to do their job. I got to trust my receivers, my quarterback. So it's just harder for me to put the risk in there. I mean, I'm sure parents have plenty of opinions on my play calling. But, you know, I feel comfortable with what I'm calling, or I wouldn't be calling. I'd be calling something else.
Yeah. I remember that play vividly. I feel like the ball went 70 yards in the air. I was like, I can't believe Jeff threw a ball that far. I didn't.
And they brought heat, and no one got near him.
And I thought the ball was going to go out of bounds too, because it was right on the sideline.
Right on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's funny how those memories are still etched.
It's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, Coach, they changed the playoff system. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't even know which system you're talking about. There's been so many changes.
So the old way of getting to the playoffs, you had to win your league.
Yes.
And a lot of times it was consequential on Thanksgiving games.
Yep.
Win and you're in.
Yes.
Now it's completely different.
Yep.
I miss the old days. Those were fun, you know, because the league was always tough. Now it's, you know, the whole, you know, you got to get in, you play playoff games in the middle. When did that change? And, you know, do you like that new format?
That changed, I want to say around 2012, 2013, right around there. Do I like it? I didn't like it at the time. Mm-hmm. And then the system they changed in 2012 got changed again in like 2018.
Yeah.
And I don't like the system they have now even more.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to go back to the old system, but I have issues with with their new proposal. So what they want to do is to have the Thanksgiving Day count, sort of like when you played. You have that Tuesday game, and then you have a Saturday game, and then I think you have a week off to the Super Bowl. Now that puts you 2 weeks into your winter seasons.
Yeah,
I think that's difficult for a lot of high school athletes, because if you're a hockey first kid, are you going to play football knowing you're going to miss tryouts? And
you just had to deal with it. You know, there was a bunch of hockey players. You know,
but that's going to be the new standard. So I'm worried it's going to put undue stress on kids to focus, when I think that's the worst thing that happens in high school sports, are kids focus. I try and encourage my kids. I don't like anyone focusing on football. If you can play another sport, play. I don't care if it's track. I don't care if it's basketball, hockey, lacrosse. Play another sport. There's a lot of different reasons, right? You get different coaches.
Yes.
You get different styles. Yeah. You get different captains that teach you different things on how to lead, that can, when you become a senior, can make you a better leader, captain, 100%. Senior. So I am all for playing as many sports as possible, and I think the new playoff system will impact that. So I'm kind of hoping, I kind of like it the way it is.
That's an unselfish perspective, Coach. You know, you're thinking about the kids.
I also think about the other coaches. Like, I wouldn't like it if hockey's like, well, we're going to start 2 weeks early. Yeah. So why would I do that to them? It's just fair is fair.
Well, Coach, you know, I've known you for a while, and I know just as important to winning games for you is changing these kids' lives, providing a positive impact. You were also involved in the school as a resource office, and, you know, the whole school knows you, you know, and they have amazing things to say about you, you know, what you've provided to them, you know, and the relationships you have. I joked around with Evan before, saying between the hours of 12 and 1, you know, this studio is going to be the safest place in Westwood. But how important, you know, it is providing a positive impact on these kids' lives, you know, and seniors, the next year they're going to be off to college, very important parts of their lives where they're going to work towards their profession. Eventually they want to become, leaders, fathers, husbands, eventually grandfathers, things like that, and setting examples, generational examples. How important is that to you as a football coach? Because you're dealing with, a lot of these future leaders on your team.
No, and I'm going to come out and say, I love to win, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we play sports, right? Is to win. But the reality is it's secondary to the life lessons you learn in sports.
Yeah.
The discipline you learn, and I obviously have to focus on football, but the discipline you learn in football, in my opinion, is unlike any other sport. It's physical, it's mental, and it prepares you for life. It lets you deal with adversity, whether it's playing time, whether it's stuff that happens on the field. There's a myriad of things where you just have to learn. And the discipline part of it is a huge part that will impact you the rest of your life as you learn these skills. Being a good teammate, being able to work with others is going to impact any job you get. Being committed, right? If you're going to commit to something, you stay with it. Yeah. All these different life lessons is really what all sports are about, yeah. But, I talk to my coaches about it all the time. I'm like, this is what we're doing, right? Football is important, but realize their life lessons. And if a kid makes a mistake and breaks a team rule, regardless of how it impacts the team, rules are rules and punishments are punishments. And, and it's cost me games in the past and, but you set a tone and you create a culture that kids no longer want to roll the dice on that stuff. Whether it's weekend activities, whether it's not doing their homework or acting up in school, a consequence is a consequence. And if football is the leverage to help them learn that, and it impacts the way they develop and the way they are the rest of their lives. That's why, honestly, that's why I coach. And there's kids like you, and I can go back to my first year of coaching. I coached Joe Vinci, who's now one of your coworkers. Now one of my coworkers. George Laham, who now does my taxes. It's crazy, but now I get to see these men as men. And, part of me inside is like, it's pretty cool.
There's no question football impacted their lives for the positive and the leaders that they are. College coach used to say, sudden change. You'd be doing a drill and all of a sudden he changed the whole drill. But that's what happens in the game. Yep. And you have to be ready. To be able to be a successful team coach, the guys on the field have to be healthy. How important has Paul Lilla been to you and your team over the last several years?
I say it, I guarantee I said it at your banquet. I've said it every single year since I've known Paul, and that's 24 years now. He's a good friend of mine, but I've coached at other organizations, at other schools. He is by far, bar none, the best certified athletic trainer in the state. Yeah. He knows his job. He's outstanding at his job. But what makes him so special is how he cares about the kids. He truly cares. He wants them to be on the field. It's not, liability. It's what's best for the athlete. Yes. Right? And if he can get them back on the field because those kids want to play, he's going to make sure that happens. If he doesn't think it's safe for them, he's not going to let it happen. He's unbelievably good at his job. And we are so blessed to have him as part of our school. I was texting with him yesterday, actually. But he is he's huge for the school.
He's the best.
It really is.
Yep.
And, it's funny because we can go back and, there were situations back when you played where some kids got doctor's notes and overrode what he wanted. And, we still talk about that stuff. And he's like, you know what? He goes, I wouldn't let that happen again. I don't care what a doctor says, right? Because again, he knows it's not what's in the best interest of the athlete. No. And high school athletes are awesome, but they're not always thinking rationally.
Well, we had Marks Arthur on, and we talked about him playing on a torn ACL. And obviously Paul says it's not in your best interest. But, playoffs, Super Bowl, and the understanding, obviously, you're not going to go out there if it's going to get any worse. It's a pain threshold thing, and you can't really tear an already torn ACL. Went out there and contributed, So we had a funny conversation about that. What can you tell us about the upcoming season, Coach? You had a very successful season last year. What are some of the expectations, if you have any, for this season? And what's the ceiling?
So that's a great question. Obviously our number one goal every year is the TVL title.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's in our control. Everything else is outside of our control.
Yeah.
Playoffs, weather, all that. Like we focus on what's achievable as our number one goal, which is winning the TVL. I certainly think that's within our grasp. We got to have a great year. We've had a great off season, but we got to stay healthy. We got to have, the ball bounce the right way here and there. But we're definitely, that's certainly a big goal of ours. And then, on top of that, we'd like to be able to get into the playoffs and do some damage.
Absolutely.
We've made the playoffs the last few years and, got bounced out in the first round. And, I think the culture, the belief amongst these kids is to take it to a whole nother level. Making the playoffs no longer is enough. We want to do damage. Obviously the goal of every team in the state is to win the state.
Absolutely.
But, they feel like this year that they can push that and, it's a goal that they have on their list. So, I love a lot of the athletes I have coming back. I got some really good weapons coming back. We have a really great quarterback competition going to be going on.
Yeah.
I got 2 wideouts last year that were unbelievable that are back. I definitely have some kids who were right behind them that have made some big steps in the offseason. So I feel like offensively, in our skill positions, we're really good.
Mm-hmm.
Up front, I graduated 4 offensive linemen. They were big, strong, 2-year starters. Again, they're going to be my question mark in the fact that there's just a lot to replace.
Yep.
I had Greg Papa was, all Division 4, all division player. Joe Vinci, Ollie Gannon, Cole.
Yep.
I mean, those are just some big bodies that were committed and worked well together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to, the games are, you said it earlier, games are won and lost up front.
Yep.
And that's going to be what we find out early in camp, early in the season is where we match up.
Coach, how close is Westwood to its next state championship?
I would say we're as close as we're going to be at any point. I think the culture is right. I think the believability within the program is right. The kids are committed, but only one team does it, right? So, of the, I don't even know how many, 40-something teams in Division 4. It feels like there's a million in Division 4 and like 3 in Division 3. But, only one of those 40 teams are going to get their dream. But I feel like this team and this group of seniors and this group, as a whole, all 70 kids, the focus is right, and it could be around the corner. But again, there's so many variables in it. Kids have to stay healthy. Kids have to continue to work. They have to stay focused. The ball has to bounce one way, right or wrong in a game, and that. We can go back to when you played in the Medfield game. That ball didn't bounce our way. I think we had 4 fumbles, and they were all in the middle, and we could have had a shot at every one of them, and we didn't get one. They're just games that happens, and if it happens in the playoffs, you're going to be out, regardless of how much better or worse you are than someone. Like last year, I thought, SSB played a great game against us in the playoffs, but, there was a 20-mile-an-hour wind coming off the water, and it affected our pass game.
Yeah.
If we got a home game out of that, do we win? Who knows? But again, there's just so many variables. But I feel like this team, their mindset is there, and it's just going to come down to hopefully a healthy season, and we'll see what happens in November.
Football's an odd sport in that you could have a losing season and then win the state championship the next year. It's kind of what happened with us.
Yep.
We had a very average season. I would say 2002. 2003.
We were 5-6 in 2002.
And then 2003, I think we went like 11-1, win a Super Bowl. Went back to back. But football is one of those sports where you could be 5-6, and you really can't predict what's going to happen before the season. You can kind of see it. It starts with game 1. Starts before that. Starts with the off season. But game 1 and game 2, and you start seeing something special, and then guys start playing for each other. They start playing for the guy next to them and the team. And when you start getting that momentum, that's when I feel like the team sees there is something special going on here. let's stay healthy. Let's remain focused, and the opportunity for good things approach where you still got to go out and win those games, the big games and whatnot. But that's what I had noticed where, any team can just have, because other teams are losing great players too and whatnot. I do have one last question for you that I think is an important question.
Okay.
I think football, particularly head coaching football, is one of the more challenging roles for high school sports coaches. It's a very emotional sport. It requires a lot of commitment. And behind every great football coach is an amazing supporter. Beth has been by your side 20 plus years, and she loves, I feel, football as much as you. She loves seeing you coach your sons. How special has she been supporting you day one through the ups and downs, and ensuring that she's there and has been there and will continue to be there as your number one supporter?
I couldn't do it without her.
Yeah.
If she wasn't fully behind me coaching, I'd have been done a long time ago. Early in the marriage, I'd always have like a conversation of like, hey, I'm going to do it next year. And she, have that little conversation. And she never flinched at it. She never really understood it though, until like the last 4 years when my kids got in it. And then all of a sudden she went to the games and knew people involved and finally understood what being part of that program is, and now she is fully on board. So I don't really have to have those conversations.
So it took
anymore.
a few years.
Like 16. No, but I wouldn't do it without her. She's been tremendous. I mean, if you think about the amount of time I coached in the years where my kids were 5, 6, 7 years old. And, I'm leaving her with 3 kids and I'm running out on a Friday night and I practice Saturday morning and she's shuffling them off to soccer and there's no complaints. So I know I couldn't do it without her and her support. And that's a big part of why I coach, and I coach the way I do because I know I have that support at home, that I don't have to split my loyalties, and I know I can fully commit to these kids.
I could see how difficult those first years were, folks at home. If you didn't know, it wasn't easy for you your first few years. I remember you coming in working a night shift and then coaching. You'd take naps every now and then before practice. This man has been all in on this program and all in on Westwood football for quite some time, and I saw behind the scenes, all the sacrifice you made. So I'm very appreciative of it because you were a huge part in some of the best memories in my life, and I know your life as well.
Absolutely.
And Evan and I cannot wait to call some of those memories.
It'll be awesome.
We're looking forward to that, and just wanted to thank you for coming on. We certainly want to have you on throughout the season as well, get your perspective on the upcoming games and whatnot.
Yep.
But we appreciate it, man, and thanks for hopping on and having a conversation with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening to a lot of war stories.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, folks. Appreciate you tuning in, and looking forward to the next one.